Okay, tonight's lesson plan, practice lesson plan, is going to be the Power Off 180. And the Power Off 180 is going to be an energy management exercise similar to the approach to landing last night. We're going to um, basically, from the perch point, from a beam the numbers on the downwind leg, we're going to pull the power back to idle and assess our energy to see that we can make it all the way to the runway. And per the FAA ACS, the Airman Certificate Standards, that standard is -0, so it doesn't want us to aim short into the underrun, and plus 200 feet. So pretty tight tolerance, and we'll be using a lot of physics and aerodynamics to lick our thumb, put it to the wind, and figure out where we are in time and space, and then balance all of those things to get us to the runway safe and sound. So the problem statement is going to be if we lose our engine at any defined point within the pattern. This one specifically will be a beam, our touchdown point. So we will be at that perch point, is what the Air Force calls it, at that area on downwind where we are a beam, our touchdown point. We can look out our left. We can look out our left window at our 9 o'clock position, and we can see the runway. We'll be at pattern altitude, which is 1,000 feet. AGL, above ground level, and it'll be 1700 MSL, mean sea level, because the airport elevation at Monroe is 700 feet MSL, and so 1,000 feet AGL above that would give us 1700 feet MSL. Desired outcome, again, use our energy, be precise, land on the runway. And I want to make this lesson plan pretty quick, so let's keep it less than 10 minutes, and we're 2 minutes in. Okay. Here are the four main principles: energy conservation, if I can speak. Again, altitude is our potential energy, and airspeed is our kinetic energy. Best glide ratio, so understanding what best glide is, and we can understand that best by looking at the lift over drag chart, the L over D formula here for L over D max. Last night I didn't do a great job of describing this chart, but essentially you have your parasite drag and your induced drag, and those combine together to make your total drag. And where your total drag is the lowest per unit of lift is where you have the best glide. And we can confirm that by looking in the aircraft POH, which is the pilot operating handbook. And then there's some FAA word salad here, number jumbles, essentially the airplane flying handbook and the aviation instruction handbook, and the ACS, which is the standards, are the resources that you can go to. And then having a runway to practice or a sim is great. So let's look at the POH so we can do a little background research on what a POH is. Anytime you buy or fly a airplane, it comes with a POH. POH should be in the aircraft at all times, and they're broken down into sections. Section 3 is always the emergency procedures. So here is a 73-page POH. This is just a generic one that I found online, but we can see in section 3 of emergency procedures labeled here that they have airspeeds for emergency operation, and they are describing that as maximum glide at 2,300 pounds as 65 knots. Also, the generic checklist, the checkmate ones that you can find that are in most 172s, also show best glide as 65 knots here, among some other speeds that you can take note of. So, has rotation, angles, angle of climb, and best rate. Okay, let's chair fly. So we went over the principles here. Let's look at what we're about to go do in comparison to last night, and talk a little bit about energy management. Let me pull up the iPad so I can draw on here as well. So last night we talked about a normal approach. We have the downwind leg, and we talked about this being 667 feet because we know that we're 1,000 feet AGL here, and we need to lose 333 feet on this leg and 333 feet on this base leg. and 333 feet on this final leg. 333 times 3 equals 1,000. So we know that we have 3 nautical miles here because this is showing as 1 nautical mile. So this is 6,000 feet. So 6,000, 6,000, 6,000. That's our total here. So we have three nautical miles, and we have 1,000 feet. So this is going to give us 333 feet. We know that we are flying this at 90 knots until we get to, we cut the power at 1800. We're 90 knots. We're 90 knots until we get to about here. Then we start to slow down to that final approach speed of, what did we say it was? 75 knots, right? So we have our checkup points. So we're looking for 667 feet, 90 knots. We're looking for 333 feet, 90 knots. And this is a good energy state for landing. And also at a 1 nautical mile final at 333 feet, that puts us on a perfect 3-degree wire, which is a standard angle that we talked about last night. 3 degrees, and yada yada yada. We want 3 degrees for our trigonometry there. With this one, we're doing a power off 180, so it's a little bit different. We don't have the luxury of having power for 90 knots. So when we look at our energy state, we have 100 or 1,000 feet AGL, and we are 90 knots. We're going to keep the wings level, and we're going to slow to 65 knots. So we're going to start our turn back to the runway, and we're going to just hold level at 1,000 feet until we get to 65, because we're trying to get the best glide as quickly as possible. Now we're not going to climb to do that. We could technically cash in our airspeed, our 30 or 25 knots, to get higher and then get to 65 quicker, and that would give us a longer glide ratio. We would get further distance because we got to our glide speed quicker, but we're not going to do that. For this, we're just going to keep it level. We're going to turn back to the runway, and we're going to start to assess our energy. So our key point here is halfway down, halfway around. As we start that modified base key turn. In the Air Force, we had high key. So we had high key. It was basically a low key and then a base key. So we had 3 keys, and that was just a spiral descent over the top of the runway to land. But we're checking our energy at all times. So here, halfway down, 500 feet, we want to be at 65 knots. If we're 500 feet, 65 knots, then we can start to change our aircraft drag coefficient, because we want to ensure that runway is made. Again, we don't want to go over 200 feet. So the ways that we can start to slow down the aircraft or increase the drag on the aircraft while not slowing down the aircraft would be to put our flaps in. So here's our handy dandy plane. So we put our flaps in. We could side load the aircraft, so turn the plane into the relative wind so that we are slipping the aircraft. That'll put a lot of drag on the side of the aircraft so that we can increase the drag while maintaining the speed, which will increase our descent rate, so that we can start to keep that aim point on the windscreen that'll be centered there. Again, if that aim point starts to shift high in the windscreen, then we know that we're ducking under it. We're aiming short then. And if that aim point that we are shooting for starts to move down, then we know that we are aiming long. So just like a gun sight, if I put my thumb out, I'm looking kind of where it's going to go. I got 2 different reference points for the gun sight. So I have the dashboard on the plane, and then I have this is the hardest part of instructing, is just getting tongue-tied. You have, well, here, I got the internet, so. What's it called? Here we go. The front sight. Wow, I feel really intelligent now. So you have that rear sight, which is the aircraft, your cowling, or the dash, and then the front sight would be the aim point of the runway. So if that front sight, the runway, starts to shift up, you know you're ducking under. If it shifts down, then you know you're aiming long. Okay. Now that I feel smart. Okay, we are at 8 minutes. All right, let's fly the thing. So again, slowing from 90 knots to 65 knots, starting our turn, starting to assess our energy. We want to aim at, let's say, the numbers. So if we're doing 65 knots, then, well, let's kind of make it happen. Okay, let's get some eyes on what's going on here. Let's check our energy state first and foremost. So we are 90 knots, 1690 on the clock, MSL. So that's our energy state based off our kinetic and potential energy. And it looks like we are about a nautical mile to the east of the airport. And again, let's go back and look at our chair flying here. So yesterday we talked about, you know, this is a visual maneuver, so let's look outside. We talked about flying to the highway, parallel on the highway, and then being just shy of the quarry. I overshot the highway and I overshot the quarry and basically flew an atrocious pattern. So hopefully tonight I can do something a little better. But I don't want to just turn directly towards the runway, then I'll overshoot. I think I want to come to maybe what is this, Old Charlotte Highway, Old Monroe is what it used to be, I think, but Old Charlotte, and kind of start to turn around Old Charlotte, and that'll give me a half mile to 0.6 here. So yeah, let's kind of shoot for that. So let's start our turn. Let's keep straight, slow to 65, see if we're above 500 over Old Charlotte and 65, and if we are, then we can continue the turn down here to the numbers, assessing our energy. And my guess is we're going to be, well, let's just see. Okay. Power, cool. All right, let's look outside for one, and let's hit play for two. All right, power's immediately coming back to idle. We hear it go to idle. I'm slowing the aircraft down. I want to stay at altitude here. I'm dropping in altitude, so I got to raise the nose up to pin that VSI. You see it's showing at -200. I'm still descending. And let's go ahead and start that turn. So I'm still descending, and I still haven't even gotten to 65. So a lot of backstick pressure. There's 66. Keep that backstick pressure. There's 66. All right, 66 plus or minus 5 knots. I'm close, but no cigar. There's the highway. There's the quarry. I'm somewhere in between. So we said 1,300 feet, halfway around, halfway down, 500 feet above. There's 1,320, 66 knots. Pretty good on energy. Let's start to look at the runway here. Keep the turn coming around. I'm getting fast, so bring the nose up. If I get fast, I'm not going to have best glide, so I want best glide. Otherwise, I won't be using my energy most efficiently. So, and I would say runway's assured. So let's go ahead and put our flaps in, as you see bottom right of the screen, and that nose is just going to want to float. That might have been too much flaps, to be honest, if I'm aiming at the numbers. So my speed's dropping. Let's lower the nose to capture our 65. I didn't fly a good platform there. I decelerated too much. And I want that 23 to just pin. You see how it's just a couple of fingers above the dashboard there? I just want it to pin right there. I want it to get bigger and larger as it approaches. And then I'm going to start to shift my flare. Look down the runway. Pin the cowling on the runway. Don't let it go above that horizon. Hold it off. 49, 48, 40, touchdown at 47. And I was really long. I aimed at the numbers and I touched down at the 1,000-foot markers. So outside of ACS standards. So not great. But I think we got the key checkpoints there for looking for our energy state. So at our high key point, we were really good on energy, or sorry, at our halfway down, halfway around point, we were good on energy. And then I threw flaps in and we ballooned a lot. So I think I could have either put flaps in earlier, or I could have put flaps in and side loaded the aircraft, getting that that slip going, or I could have almost flew a normal pattern where I floated that turn looking towards something similar. So I think we flew kind of this track. We stayed straight here, and then we flew over Shady Lane, and then I pointed directly at the runway, and got a little. I mean, it's good. I had good energy. I had a lot of energy to spare, which if we lose our engine in the pattern, is a good thing. Okay, we'll stop it there.